Oh. Hey, very nice, very nice. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the stream. My name is Dan Smith. This is hosted in my digital house today. Very thanks to the guys at Guitar Vivo. We are joined by Bruce Forman, jazz guitar player, self-professed cowboy, member and operator in many different ensembles. Turns up in quite a few different places. Also, the kind of paving the way for the first sort of interspecies jazz guitar duo, man and canine. Is that all fairly accurate there, Bruce?
Yes, that's correct. She's right here. Ruby, come here. Come on. Ruby, come. Ruby, Ruby, everybody.
Oh, everything is better with a pooch in tow, I would say. So, guys, we are here. Well, why are we here? We are here to kind of announce, promote, celebrate Bruce's new product with Guitar Vivo, which is a book of 16 solo jazz guitar etudes, which are transcriptions from his first chorus of the day series. Which do you want to tell us a little bit about how that kind of started, Bruce? Like where that sort of came from?
Yes, well, that started at the beginning of, remember the pandemic? Does
Oh
everybody
yeah,
still remember that?
big
Well,
time.
we were kind of removed from gigs, removed from hanging with each other, and I started a thing called Grumps TV, which is on my YouTube channel. It was like a home version of a sitcom, sort of I Love Lucy meets Fernwood Tonight, for those of you people that know crazy sitcoms. Anyways, but I was watching, of course, the internet because that was the only place where everybody was playing, and I noticed there was a propensity of people playing licks, like just cool licks to impress other musicians, and or people doing highly produced things. And of course, being a jazz musician, both of those things sort of slightly insulted me a little bit or hurt me. And so I decided, well, I'm just going to do a chorus of music that's a complete statement, make it, the first thing I touch, I pick up my guitar after I walk Ruby, I get in, I walk my dog, I sit in my studio, I decide on what tune I'm going to play, or maybe I think about it while I'm walking. I sit down and I play the first chorus of the day. You hear the first notes I play, no bullshit, no editing, and then I put it out to the world. And it became like my Zen exercise during the pandemic. And I look forward to it every day, and the challenge of it, and of course the slap in the face of having to listen to myself every day, and the imperfections or the things I wanted to change, which was great. It inspired me to practice all day, and I would just continue doing that. So that's how that series started. And then my friends started watching and following me, and next thing you know, I got a fairly sizable following, for at least for a jazz guitar player. And I'm still doing it, but now I'm generally only doing it when I'm not on the road.
That's fair. The other thing as well is it's like because you're publishing it and you're putting it out there, there's almost a bit of a contract that you're sort of signing with yourself there. And the other thing is once you get a bit of a well, this is also how social media kind of works in that it wants you to be posting every day anyway. So
Uh-huh.
there's a strange kind of relationship there where it's like you're making a contract with yourself to get up, do that. It's on camera. Whatever happens, happens. Um, I don't know if the phrase "warts and all" gets used in America. People say
Say
that.
that again.
People use the phrase "warts and all." Basically means with
Oh, warts and
mistakes.
all. Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
We just say it differently.
Oh,
Warts and
okay.
all.
Fair, fair. But yeah, how many do you think you've done in total at this point?
I'd say I'm over 1,000.
That's insane. And within that, are there repeat tunes at any
I'm
point?
sure there are. I mean, look, I'm getting older. I can't remember everything. I can't remember what I had for breakfast. So, I mean, I never promised it would be 1,000 different songs. I just said it was the first chorus of the day. I mean, if I did a chorus and when I do blues, because blues is only 12 bars, I'll generally do like three choruses of blues because, I mean, because when I started, Instagram was kind of finicky about the minute thing.
Yeah, big
So
time.
so like 32 bar tune had to be about 100 whatever beats per minute, and then I could get 32 bar tune. And so if I did a blues, I'd usually do three choruses just because, okay, now I've got around 36 bars, so that would fit in the minute. And but I never promised myself. I mean, if I feel like playing an arrangement I wrote the day before, I'll play that, because that's what I'm thinking about, or I'll improvise something. Generally, I'll think, wow, I'm going to play this tune. Well, what would be a fun key to try to play it in? Because as you know, most of the keys when you're a jazz musician is usually E flat or F or B flat.
So
And
not
like,
guitar
A,
keys.
A and D are just great keys for the guitar, as are G. So I would like kind of say, well, I wonder what's going to happen if I just play this tune in this key. And so, and of course, it's like a gig now because I'm doing it in front of the camera, which means my attention to detail and creativity and sound. There's actually gravity involved. It's not just
The
practicing. I
stakes.
mean, it's like I'm playing a concert, so I have to do have I force myself, and I generally do in my practice, and I would suggest this of everybody, is really try and live up to whatever your performance ideals are when you're practicing. Try to be in that mindset, even though you're working on stuff. Remember that eventually this is going to be performed, and you need to be integrated it into your performance side of your playing. So, I mean, I don't like to think of it as practice. I just think of it as playing, but with the added benefit of being able to stop and work on something if you have something that needs attention.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's quite an interesting point actually, because it's almost you're bridging the gap a little bit between the practice room and the actual gig. You know what I mean? You
Yeah,
sort of
I
putting
mean,
yourself in that
I,
place of like, I'm going to perform anyway, and I sort of get
right,
used to that.
right. I when I was really young, I played in this trio with this pianist. He was a blind guy, and Barney played like Oscar Peterson style. Played the crap out of the piano, and one day I asked him, I said, how much do you practice? Because he just had so much chops. And he looked at me, he says, I don't even have a piano. He said, obviously he practiced a lot at one point in his life, but he said, you got to make your practice your playing and you're playing your practice. Which to me meant also without the instrument in your hands, thinking about music, conceiving things. And it was a real lesson for me about like, really all that stuff comes from your ears,
Mm.
doesn't come from your hands. So if you can hear it, you can get your body to do it. And so many people, I think, don't work on their hearing while they're practicing. They work on their playing. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
there's a big opportunity there to
I
grow.
I tell students this about. I use a slightly more modern metaphor. I talk about CPU usage. So obviously, if your computer is doing a very heavy task, it might be like 80% of your brain CPU is getting used on this thing. It's like
Right.
I tell people if they're gonna pick a song to perform with each other, maybe pick something that's perhaps slightly lower. So you've got more CPU free to think about what's the drummer doing, what's the bass player doing. If you're absolutely at the edge of your ability constantly, and everyone in the band's like that, nobody's going to be able to listen to anyone. No one's going to be able to free themselves up. You know what I mean? It's like,
Sounds like a lot of bands I've heard, actually.
well, so there's loads of things I would like to ask you, and we'll get onto some kind of things that specifically link to the book and the release. But we've already had a question, and I know you've probably been asked this and you've spoken about this multiple times recently. But can you tell us about the guitar that you're currently holding?
Oh, yes, this guitar. For those of you who've been living under a rock somewhere, I am now the caretaker of the guitar that Barney Kessel was the caretaker of for most of his career. Most of the jazz um, performances of his life were done on this guitar. All the way back, it's a 1946 ES 350. He's had it almost since it was brand new, as far as I know, and he's done a lot of modifications to it. But this is the guitar when I went on the road with him back in the 80s and 70s that he played. And it's the record. It's the one that's on the Julie London hit "Crime." That record with "Crimea River," and
Like
it's
the intro.
if you watch some of the old Oscar Peterson trio, when he was the first guitarist in the Oscar Peterson trio, and if you watch those, I mean, this was back before it's had three fingerboards, back when it had its original pickup and fingerboard, and whatever. Um, but this was Barney's guitar, and yeah, I am now the person who owns it and plays it, and it's my guitar now, and I really love it. And of course, it helps picking up an instrument. You know where it's been. It sort of ups the need to really bring your best game every day you play. I mean, I can't think of a moment where I don't like just look down at this guitar and go, oh, there's no chance I'm going to like do less than my very best all the time.
I guess there's an element of sort of like check your privilege in a way. It's kind of like, the guitar has been through so much, seen so many different artists, been around the world, been on all these records and stuff, and to sit in the corner and look at it and go, oh, I don't really feel like it, seems really insulting to the legacy of this particular instrument.
It's not an option, yeah. And I mean, like I was with him when the headstock got broken.
Right.
But we were in Australia. It was, I think, Qantas Airlines broke it, and might have been Air New Zealand, but they made him check it, and he was real pissed off about it. And the headstock broke, and he was obviously very upset about that. Obviously, there's cracks everywhere. It's just like a dog that lost every fight it was in. And but in this pickup, he looked for high and low for this pickup. I mean, he searched. He had had a lot of other pickups in it until this one he settled with. And I suggest everybody go to YouTube. Barney Kessel talks about his guitar because he gives you a really good description of what he left some of the stuff out, like the amount of fingerboards it's had and things like of that nature, and why he painted the headstock over. It is a Gibson, a 46 ES 350, but and I mean, even every day I kind of see, oh, he did this, oh, he did that, but he always had it, because when I was on the road, it was always really hard to play. He liked a guitar. It was like a mountain you had to climb, kind of. And I'm not of that philosophy. I think making the guitar playable so that you're not fighting, and and it's consistent throughout the range. I think those are good qualities in an instrument. So I have it set up. Everybody I know who played it when Barney had it play it and go, whoa, I don't remember it feeling this good.
Right. I have a friend that played he played Brian May's guitar once, like the actual one, and he said it was like an absolute dog. It was like horrendous to play, but it doesn't really matter what you think of it. It's Brian May's playing it, so
exactly. And I often thought he kept it that way just so we would sound like shit on it when we played it. You know what I mean? Like he knew how to work it, but none of us did. So like, he kept people from sitting in that way.
I'm sure there's a line in a movie somewhere where somebody's like, "You're not worried about your car," and someone's like, "Nobody can drive this car but me." Like the car is so broken that only one person can get in it and make it work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I guess because the stuff that I'd like to talk about is so vast. I think
Cool.
the kind of solo jazz guitar thing, we previously kind of talked about this before we went live, so we'll kind of have to repeat that now. But in my opinion, the solo jazz guitar thing, like not even necessarily arrangements, but being able to sit down, have all these songs in your head, be able to pick a key, and just be able to be this sort of human jukebox, if you like, and be able to just have a performance just come out of you, is like a super romantic idea to me. And it seems like quite I don't know if it's a lost art as such, but to do it at the level that you're doing it on these first chorus of the day videos, there's so many moving parts and so much going on in that it'd be nice to kind of pick it apart and then look at some of these things, and then when people look at the transcriptions in the book, they can kind of reverse engineer it in a way for some of the things that perhaps we've talked about. If you like, as a starting point, I'm probably slightly higher than a dabbler, but I'm absolutely not a proper disciple of the jazz guitar thing. I guess in internet speak, I'd probably be what's called a filthy casual because I have to do other things to sort of keep working on that. Yeah. But my sort of loose way is like, right, that's the melody, that's the harmony. So I kind of go bass note, melody note, fill in the gaps in between. Super simple starting point, and then you can kind of branch out from there. But how would you perhaps kind of look at a standard and then try and build something like that?
I think your way is really good, provided you I think first of all, back to guitar, solo guitar. I mean, Joe Pass beat me up. I mean, I would hang out with him. Of course, he would spend a lot of time in San Francisco. He would work for a week at a time at the Fairmont Hotel there, either with Ella or solo or with Oscar Peterson. He'd come a lot, and I would go hang out with him pretty much every day. But the routine was I'd go to his room, knock on the door, bring him my guitar, make me get out my guitar, and then he'd make me play a concert for him solo. He was all like, beat me up, like, and here I am playing for him, and he's like kind of listening and commenting occasionally, but he just like was very much like, no, you got to be able to do all this stuff yourself. So even though I've always considered myself a band guitarist till recently, I have embraced the solo thing, particularly during the pandemic and with my show, The Red Guitar, which is a solo show. So, and I'm realizing how much wisdom there is in just approaching the guitar as as like a piano, the complete instrument. You've got all the things covered. And to study it that way and to play it that way in your practice and your discovery process, so that when you go out to play with other, whether it be solo or with a big band, it becomes more of a process of what do you hear that needs to be played, and then you're cool with playing that, because you've got it all covered.
Yeah.
I see the value, and I wish I had earlier in my life seen the value of practicing with this mindset, and then to segue into your idea of like, you got the bass note, you got the chords, or the melody note, and then you fill in the stuff in between. To me, I think the way we learned the guitar and got good real quickly at it was because we were taught shapes were chords, and then basic finger patterns and or scales were lines, melodies, or solos. And it made us get way better fast, even professionally functional with a chart,
Yeah.
But I think it did a disservice to us as well, because we need to look at the elements of music a little bit separately so that we can use them better. Like, you've got the bass notes, yes, and you've got the melody, which could be a melodic line, could be the melody of the song, or it could even be the voice leading of the harmony you're playing. And then you've got the actual harmony, the stuff in between, right? And so the more you can isolate those things and juggle those things, that's where you get to a place like where Joe Pass was, where I am, and I think both Joe and I, our North Star for this is Art Tatum, the piano player. If you listen to that, the interaction of the bass and the melodic line, whether it's the melody or the solo or the voice leading, and then the inner harmony moving with that, you hear how it's all being constructed in this really imaginative way, which takes the song out of this sort of that into that idea, and all of a sudden now you're so like, that was harmony and melody, bass, harmony, melody, bass, and you're like you start, and of course it's easier to do with your hand, but you can also just do it with your pick. And because I have the ability to kind of conceive things separately, and I've worked on them separately, I have like a lot more ability to use my imagination to just create different textures and take advantage of something. Oh, I just played that. Why don't I do that again? The motific side of music, which in my opinion is really the thing that is missing in most jazz players today, is they're just not listening to themselves. They're so busy thinking that they're not hearing the next thing to play. They're you know what I mean? They're just thinking of the next thing to play.
Too much CPU.
Yeah, right. So if I play, well, I can hear that the next phrase should probably be, could you hear like every idea I played was coming from a sound which gave me a lot more information with deciding what to play next, because I not only had just the notes or the intervals, but I had rhythms and I had articulations and I had textures to play off of. And it gave me so much more of a telling a story vibe feeling when I'm going. So, and of course, it also activated, like, I'm asking myself, I just heard that. What do I want to hear next? Well, not only, it's not just what's in my head, it's like every record I've ever heard in my life is on that hard drive in my brain,
Yeah.
just waiting to come out. And it's almost like we're building a new kind of software to utilize it by thinking this way and by practicing this way. I know it's a
The,
long answer to your
no, no,
question.
no, no. It's a great answer. The other thing with that as well is if you're on a gig and there's lots of improvisation, improvising that way can get you through an entire chorus in quite a kind of relaxed but still creative way because you're not throwing away ideas. You've got an idea and then you're sticking with it, and then you might, you might not necessarily abandon that idea, but you might kind of take it away a little bit later on. But if it's like, say it's a blues, if it's 12 bars of 12 separate ideas, you could get through an entire chorus on one idea, and then you can build from there. And surely that's less, again, CPU power and stress.
I mean, there's like, I know how guys, like, they want to think, I want to play this, like, I want to play this. It will come to you, just let it come to you. You've learned it. It's in there. Don't make the idea, kind of make the idea to wait as long as possible to play it. You know what I mean? To see how many things you can do before you get around to playing it. That's, to me, a better way to think about your vocabulary or your licks or whatever you want to call it. And, I mean, yeah, and just the more you hear, the better, because when you hear something, it not only has a pitch and a rhythm, it also has an articulation and dynamic, and it has a time shading to it because you're hearing it. So it has all these musical elements. Whereas if I think F sharp, I mean, it's
Yeah,
going to
yeah,
ring
yeah.
as long as it just rings, and it's going to be as loud as it just happens to be. You know what I mean? There's not enough music information in thinking that note as hearing a phrase with that note in it.
Mm.
And so, I think people, when they practice, they spend a lot of time, and they'll even say this, I'm working on my playing. And I just want to suggest to everybody, you're not just working on your playing, you're working on your hearing too. Because the wonderful thing is you're sitting there playing. What happens if I take this and I move this one note in the chord? Wow, I know what happens. Well, I can hear what that wants to do. But what if I want to take it a little further? I mean, there's like just that one idea of like what would happen if. Now I've trained myself, this is a sound. Now I can work with this sound. You know what I mean? Then the vocabulary, and you talk about CPU.
Mm.
When you're hearing, you got lots of CPU. When you're thinking, you've got limited CPU.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. There's a couple of things within that. Somebody's asked about chord forms to use with improvising melody line as the top voice. So this is a thing that you do that you're kind of moving these chord shapes around. And I'm jealous because there's one of them that I found really difficult to do. It's like the minor 7 where you have to bar the middle finger. I find that really tricky to do quick.
Oh yeah, you've got to train yourself to do that, man. But don't you play this? Okay, don't you play that chord all the time, like a 6/9 major chord?
Well, I was watching some of your videos and then I was like, that chord, and then I've subbed it out for that. I'll get away with that for now.
Everybody who has a problem with that, because it is, I've come across students. I'm just saying, be patient with yourself. You're going to be able to do this. Basically just play like that as a 6/9 chord, and then just add this note.
Yeah.
Got it. And then use the 11th. Kind of try to do like Honeysuckle Rose. Like just like that. And believe me, it's going to become friendly to you just by. And yes, you will notice. I don't know if we've told everybody. There's a book coming out. That's the big announcement. There's a book where we've got transcriptions of 16 of my first courses of the day that were cherry picked for various reasons, and they're transcribed both with notation and text. There are comments by me about the history of the song, why I picked that key, what I was thinking about before I played it. Also, observations of things I played that I think everybody should practice. and there will be editor's notes from an objective point of view, which I've read, which are just great. I mean, it just seeing what other people notice in my playing helped me understand kind of what I'm doing on another level, and will help my teaching. So this book has all of that. And how would you use it? Well, I would suggest, of course, learning the etudes is not a bad idea, but just take a piece of it. Just look and say, "Oh man, that's a cool way to play a 2/5," and just make that your own. Just take it and play it and do things with it and embellish it, and then find something else you like. I mean, I think there are so many ways to use this book. Um, and the reason why, and I thank Luke for proposing the idea to me, because it's such a great way to learn this music, because this is really the way we all learned it. We just kind of learned what other people did, but in this case now they're explaining to you why they did it, which I never had the opportunity. I mean, later in life, when I got to know a lot of these guys I stole their licks from, I would ask them, "Why did you do this?" But I mean, after having learned it and made it into my own thing, it would have been great to know that right from the genesis of coming in contact with it, because that's a real important thing. Well, I did that because this happened, and I like it, and it's like, then that opens it. It turns it from a lick, which everybody will eventually do. You start off, it becomes, I guess, a lick or a phrase you steal, but then if as you work it, it becomes a concept, and it becomes something you can make a million things out of.
Yeah, yeah.
It started off as this one thing you wanted to play, but then it ends up being something you draw lots of really great information from. So
Yeah,
I
yeah,
know
yeah.
I'm making sure everybody knows, along with this, having fun with this masterclass, we're announcing that there's a book coming out that that I think is going to be a great learning tool for everybody. I'm real excited about it, so, and I'm glad that
Well,
there
I'll
was,
just
somebody found use in all those videos I made.
Yeah, man, they're great
I'll
videos, great
just
videos.
pop up for a second and tell you guys a little bit about it because we're having some questions in the YouTube chat. So yes, sorry guys, I didn't realize my messages were getting blocked when they had the URL. We've added it to the description, so if you refresh the page, you'll be able to click straight through to it and find out more information. Basically, we're running a sale just as a launch kind of special. So if you go and pre-order the PDF, you get 20% off. I think it's at $14.99, and they're going to be emailed out, and it's going to be available worldwide on Friday. And yeah, you can find out all about it at the link in the description box on YouTube. Over to you.
Oh,
So from a tunes perspective, the standards that are on the list of 16 are all fairly well known standards. Now, from an outsider, I'm going to play the fool slightly here. From an outsider, you might come to some of these tunes and there might be substitutions, there might be all these other things going on. If somebody wanted to take one of these standards and then put it against what would be the standard, definitive changes, if there are such a thing,
mhm.
what would you recommend people do for that? Because there's a few tunes, and I think you even mentioned it on the first chord of Stella. There's a few tunes that what is considered the official changes to some of these songs can be a little bit kind of murky if you're not in the scene.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that there's just a misconception about jazz music in general. I mean, and this is by observation. No one told me this. This is not a rule. This is just Bruce's worldview. Um, that somebody once said the right changes to me, and if somebody says that to you, I suggest you run away from them as fast as you can.
Red flag.
Because all the records I ever heard, everybody's always reharmonizing, depending upon what's going on around you, what you're hearing, where it's going. I mean, everything from the bass motion to the drums can alter your perspective of how the tune goes. And of course, the melody is the song, and the rhythmic structure is the song. That's you're not going to probably mess with that unless you have a band or an arrangement that does that. But within the harmony, I mean, God, I can't think of anything more boring than playing the same changes every chorus. I mean, you want to make people hate jazz? That's a good way to do it.
Yeah.
Um, and of course, the real book came along and taught us. Well, it was great. How could you possibly know all these songs? if you're learning to play, especially since they were pop songs back in the 30s and 40s and 50s. I mean, how the hell are you going to learn these songs? Well, you got the real book, and whoever I think the real book is great. Whoever put those changes in, those are fine changes. But being a person who played with a lot of older guys and heard it on the radio, and they like it, then one guy likes it this way, another guy likes it this way. You know what I mean? And I've seen arrangements of them reharmonized. So for me, it's like, well, I hear a melody. How do I want to harmonize it? I mean, to me, that's one of the beauties of jazz is the harmony is the most malleable part of the music. We have the rhythmic structure. We can change the time feel, but we really need to adhere to that rhythm, 32 bars or whatever it is. And a melody, yeah, you can change it a little bit. If you change it too much, it stops being the song. So, I mean, the harmony is the place where our creativity and imagination can run the most
Yeah.
wild. And so for me, it's more like trying to figure, and every time I learn a tune, I hear what the original was or what I think the original was. I don't know. I don't always go back to like Cole Porter or George Gershwin sheet music, So sometimes I'll hear it just played by a guy I know who's more, there are people that I trust to be close to the original. But then when I listen to Miles' band, I know I don't even expect to hear what the composer wrote. I mean, then if I hear Herbie, particularly that band, of course they're not going to, you know what I mean? And I don't even want them to. I want to hear what they do with it so that I can develop a palette, a harmonic palette. So when I hear melodic information, I can hear options for how to color it. And then of course, like when you hear me play First Course of the Day, those are just decisions I made in the moment. I chose to color this melody this way harmonically. Now, if I'd have done it right afterwards or taken a second chorus, more than likely I probably would have changed a few things there. And I don't really hate myself when it doesn't work. It's like that I learned as much that way. Either I was hearing something and it didn't work, or maybe I thought I was hearing something and it was something different I was hearing. I mean, all these discoveries in that process are ultimately teaching me things. I'm developing a new harmonic palette. I'm learning, oh, I thought that was that, but it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like that. And your brain works off of a pleasure pain kind of thing, right? When you think you're going to play something, you put your hands down and it's not what you thought you were going to hear, it hurts. But your brain also remembers that. It's a memory. It's like, oh, that sounds like that. It doesn't sound like that. And then when you nail it, it's like, oh, that feels good. Your brain remembers that. So to get into this sort of like hear and play, I mean, to me, that's where I want to go. I want to be that guy, because my definition of the best technique in the world is being able to play what you hear the way you hear it. That to me is that's my North Star for getting better. So how do I do that? Well, a lot of it is just trying to grab things I hear and making mistakes. But of course I'm listening to it, so I'm going to make music out of it. But if I have the luxury of practice, I can stop and no, I heard this, but I thought it was this, but it was really this. Oh, okay. Now I know the difference. And now it's as deeply ingrained in me as a color would be. Like, you would say, yeah, that's a black shirt you're wearing, Bruce. You would never say it's a green shirt. You wouldn't say it's a white shirt. You know this color just from looking at it. Well, can we get to the way where we can hear a sound and identify it that clearly, right, without thinking about it? It's oh, I know that sound. That's there. And to me, a lot of that has to be discovery, trial and error, and indulging yourself in your imagination. And not saying, oh, the chord is this.
Yeah.
And I'm a really good accompanist. I think I pride myself in it. I want to get better, but I think the reason is because I don't make a decision until I hear what's happening. I'm accompanying, so like it's not like I'm the bass player where I have to be there on the beat with the note every time. I'm playing the chords, so if I don't like nail that chord, I can wait and hear what's happening, then come in on the second beat. That's okay still. So I have the luxury of that, but I also have the responsibility not to throw stuff at people that's not happening in the moment. That's going to not sound good. You know what I mean? There's a freedom and a responsibility there, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and I have to like really learn my sounds so that I know what I'm grabbing. Does that make
Definitely, definitely.
sense?
Yeah, 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 definitely.
And that's why you'll hear me like, oh, I could hear, yeah, I hear a descending bass against this. Now the song didn't wasn't written that way, but I'll find a way to make it work. And now I have to justify every bass note against every melody note, and sometimes it's like, whoa, I thought I was going to hear a major nine, but now it's a dominant seven sharp nine. Like perfect example is like you want to hear that, and that's an F major nine, but I play this, the seven sharp nine. Now, of course, it would easily become the F major nine, but it could just stand alone. And anytime you wanted to play that, and I just know that sound now. So whenever I want to hear that tension against that melody note, I'm free to use it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
I mean, I may be going way deep in the weeds, but that's kind of what you're going to experience when you play through my etudes, when you check them out. And to take something like that and just go, oh wow, every time I resolve to a major chord discourse, I'm going to use that idea just so it gets in my playing. And I find new voicings. You don't need that voicing. I can use this. I've played the B string. Sorry. So that, and pretty soon it just becomes like a word you use in your vocabulary. You don't even think about it. It's just when you hear it, you play it, and it doesn't matter if the bass player plays an F against that chord.
Yeah, yeah,
Maybe you want to. How do I release the tension? I just move up. Or if I want to keep the tension, and play over it. Whoa, and it's just sitting there against that. The world is hearing F, and even though I'm playing solo, the world's still hearing that resolution to F.
Mm.
And I'm just playing that sound of E7 sharp 9, which could also be called an F diminished, or you can call it a million things. But that sound is that sound, and I can play with it, and that's sort of my way of telling a story. Surprising the listener and, keeping things on suspense. And of course, if I play something like that, the rhythmic reaction to it in a band is heavy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
The drummer's not going to play the same thing. If I would just like to go F major 9 like they thought is when I played that chord. Chances are they're going to do something.
You've created a moment that needs
Right.
to, that needs to be
Creates a chain
reacted
reaction.
to. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So it provided everybody's listening.
Yes, 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 yes. So there's a question that's pretty guitar specific, but just one last thing on that. Given the kind of modern age, and I am guilty of this, as are quite a few guitar players out there, I believe, of kind of learning jazz in isolation. So I've got a little note here. It just says jazz as a social activity. So there you're mentioning, bass player, you're mentioning drummer. There might not be. I mean, the jazz scene in America is probably quite different to the UK. There might not necessarily be those kind of opportunities, but you're talking about listening and hearing these things. Now, those things can be more the effects of perhaps playing something that doesn't quite go the way it wants, or that does go the way it wants, is probably stronger if you're in a band situation and then you've got, you get the reactions of 2 or 3 people that are like, whoa, yeah, amazing, as opposed to sat on your own trying to play and listen and then hitting this kind of thing. So do you think there's only so much you can do on your own as a jazz guitar player? You need to be playing with people. You need to be getting out there. You need to be kind of...
Yeah, it depends on where you're going, okay?
Right.
I would say you're better off, if you don't have people to play with, you're better off playing on your own. Look at Tommy Emmanuel. Look what he's achieved, basically, because he was locked out in the middle of nowhere, And, that's at least what he says. He became a one-man band because there was just not really many people to play with,
Yeah.
the way he did it. There's lots to work on by yourself, and especially now more than ever with the internet. I remember when I was young, and guys would tell me about some Cannonball Adderley record that I needed to hear, and you just couldn't find it. I would go to the jazz record stores in my town, which had a couple. That's even how big a town I was, and even then everybody's looking for it for me. You know what I mean? Maybe they say, oh, I think a guy out in New York, so I'd call long distance, which would cost me a lot of money, and then I'd get him to mail the record to me, and I'd wait 2-3 weeks to hear this record, you know, and of course I live with it in a way that you would never live with it if you just wanted to hear it on YouTube. You just listen to it, and, you know what I mean? But you're hearing all this stuff, and you're getting information, but you're right, you need to play it. Now, whether you play it solo or whether you play it in a group, which are both great. I think the group thing is good because you can play with better players than yourself, people who have a better rhythmic feel, a different rhythmic feel, and kind of that informs your personal time feel and your ability to interact with others. It reminds you to listen while you play, as opposed to sometimes when you're solo, you just listen to yourself. And then when you go to play with people, if you get in that rut, you're just listening to yourself still.
Yeah.
You know, so yes, I highly suggest people search out playing situations, and I want to remind all guitar players the gateway for greatness is comping. You know, you're going to get a gig, and you're going to keep a gig because you comp well. You know, nobody who starts out playing is a good enough soloist to just be a leader of a band. Sorry, you know, it's like. But if you learn to comp and you spend time accompanying people, and that would mean studying the great piano players who comp, studying the great guitar players who accompany, and just having a real good sense of, if this person plays this way, this is the kind of sound they probably want behind them. Some guys like interactive compers. Some guys like, I call them carpet layers. You know, you're laying the harmony down and they just play over the top of it, and that's the way they like it, and they don't like a lot of interaction. You know, just really kind of to suss out the situation, be a great comper. And comping is way harder than soloing because it's reactive.
Mm.
You know, whereas you're soloing, you get to make the decision and play it. When you're comping, you've got to listen for the end of the phrase to interject an idea, and how rhythmic if you listen to Nat Cole, he hardly ever plays when he's singing. I don't know if you ever noticed that, but he'll be singing, you know, it's only a paper moon, then he'll play something on the piano, then it's da 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 da. You know, it's like you don't have to be playing all the time. You know, and how's the voice leading of your comping? Just because you're playing good voicings doesn't mean it sounds good. The chords have to make sense to people who are playing with you, and they're really not listening to every note in your stack.
Nobody cares how expensive your chords are. Is it doing the job?
You know what I mean? It's like, it's hard if you just play a bunch of notes. It's like, okay, that's a chord. You have to sit and think about. You know, no, I'm listening. Like if I comp the blues, what you're really hearing is the top note. You know, I mean, you're hearing basically that. I could just go. You could hear the blues progression, right? Just in that. And people are kind of, you know, hanging their ear on that. And then when they have time, I mean, they're already playing, but if they have time, then maybe they're digesting, oh, we used a major third on the G chord, so it's a G7 instead of a G minor or something. You know, I mean,
yeah.
That's the next, but you see, if without a strong melodic voice leading in your chords, you're not really comping, you're just playing chords.
Yeah.
So obviously that would be and of course, where do you think chord melody comes from? That.
Yeah.
You know, so, and again, I was lucky. I really grew up playing. I mean, I practiced a whole lot, but, you know, I was always playing. I've gigged a lot my whole life. I lived in a city with a lot of great musicians, so that was easy. For today, that may not be easy for some of the people. They may have jobs and may not be able to devote all day and night to this. But still, by thinking this way, you will progress quickly. And that's the point. And you need to do, I mean, basically we could get rid of all teachers and all the books, and all the videos with just three ideas. One, you need to listen. Two, and by listening, I mean not just to yourself, but to records, to the people you're playing with. Listen, you know. Two, you need to play. You need to play a lot. You need to get comfortable with your instrument. You need to get comfortable in all various playing situations, blah, blah, blah. And the third thing is you need to learn tunes. Okay? If you do those three things, you're going to be okay. You don't need teachers. You don't need books. You don't need lessons. However, the teachers and the books and the lessons will help you get there faster because they'll give you stuff that you may discover 20 years from now, but they'll give it to you now.
Yeah. That's always the way,
That's
isn't
the
it?
point.
Yeah.
But really, if you're not doing the three things, listening, playing, and learning tunes, I don't see how it's all going to work for you. And those are all really fun things. You know, I mean, if you have to motivate yourself to do that, I'm wondering, why did you play the instrument in the first place? To piss off your wife or your parents? You know, is that what you're really there to do? You know?
So there's been a question actually about if you're starting out with learning jazz standards, how should you approach learning them? Like, what do you think is the most kind of complete way of really getting a tune kind of under your fingers, in your ears?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you have the luxury of listening to a couple versions of it first, that's great. I mean, that's just like, you know what you're going for before you even start learning.
Which in this day and age with, Spotify and the
That's
internet.
pretty easy. Yeah, that's pretty easy. But, you know, I mean, that's really important right there. Just listen to it, hear it played by a few different artists you like. Be very well aware that they have probably changed numerous things about it.
Yeah.
And then learn the melody. Learn the melody. That's the song. The song is not the chords. You can reharmonize it. You can put lots of things in there. Learn the melody. Then you know the song. Then start learning the chords. And maybe you'll come across, wow, Miles' band played these chords, but the original sheet music has these chords. You know what? They're both right. And they both have something to teach you. And now you get to decide, because it's jazz music, remember? You get to decide what you like to do.
Yeah.
Because you're making an informed decision based on knowledge. Wow, what a cool idea. And it's not hard. And I suggest, if you learn to play them, and they're like I don't know, Bye Bye Blackbird, right? So like, okay, I started there. Well, maybe I'll find another string to start on, And what I'm doing here is I'm training my ear and my hand and my brain all to work together. Like I'm on this note, but I need that next note. I mean, I'm not gonna say it's a half step in my brain. I'm just hearing it, and if I grab it wrong, whoa, that's the pain I'm talking to, the pleasure pain thing, Okay, but what if I call that, and then I have a terminology. This is the front of my hand, and this is the back of my hand. Like 1 and 2 are the front of my hand. So now I'll say, start it with the back of your hand. What do you get? Because all I really want to teach myself through this, besides the melody, is how to hear intervals and just naturally grab them on the guitar.
So there's no thinking about scales or anything like that. Starting note.
Boom. I'm just like, I hear the next note, I'm playing it. And like, I'm trying to train myself just to grab the next note, because when it comes to improvising, that's kind of what you're doing. I wasn't thinking about any of those intervals. I was just hearing that line. But so many melodies, and so many times I played a half step and a whole step, my hand knows where it is from playing melodies, because there was a wrong note to hit and only one right note to hit. So it's like, it's not like, oh, I could have played an F or an F sharp in that line and no one would have noticed the difference. But having played melodies where an F and an F sharp is right and wrong, that trained me to hear that difference and to feel where that difference. It's like a physical savvy you develop.
Mm.
You know what I mean? It's like driving your car. You don't think about every motion you make. You've been doing it so long, all the motions are just sort of computed into it, right? And you can do that with the guitar if you learn melodies. That's what that teaches, even better than, like just knowing the song. This is teaching you far more than that. And we as guitar players, what happens? We go play, we get the real book, we play the chords because that's our job. And then we never really learn the melodies, and we wonder why, like, the horn players solo so much better than us. Well, their information starts with the melody, and ours is just the chords.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that's another thing. This is a story that fits this situation. Sorry, I'm an old guy. I like to tell stories. I was playing when I was really young, like 17 in San Francisco, and I played with these guys who were older. I was so grateful to get this gig. I was playing with really, they were more in the swing and trad style, but they're just the most burning cats, and they knew a million tunes. And I knew this was going to be so great for me. And all I wanted was to stay and keep playing with them as long as possible. But the first night I was on the gig, they never let me take a solo. They would just, it almost felt like passive aggressive. I mean, like I'd be figuring out the changes by listening and by watching the left hand of the piano, or maybe the bass. He's playing the roots, so that's kind of always really helpful. I suggest anybody learn to do that. Even, an upright bass is the same as the guitar. It's just tilted a different way. And as soon as you can kind of see the spacing, you don't need to guess what the root is anymore. You know what I mean? So that if you're not hearing it, that's a place to get some information. And that's what I was kind of doing, figuring out the chord. I could hear the difference between minor and major and dominant. So that, I was okay. So I'm playing these tunes. And the owner finally came up to me and he says, "You're probably wondering why I don't ever let you take a ride on any of these songs." And I said, "Yeah, I mean, I didn't want to like fuck up the gig. I wanted to keep it." And he said, "Can you play the melody?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Well, what makes you think you'd play anything anybody would want to hear?" And I mean, he wasn't being mean. It wasn't evil. I mean, it was just a question.
Mm.
It seemed obvious to him, you know what I mean? And I realized, yeah, he's kind of right. So now, after that moment, what did I do? I knew I'd figure out the chords. I knew I got one shot to hear that melody and print it on the hard drive.
Right.
And that has fundamentally changed how quickly I progressed and how much better my playing got. That's why
I think a mistake that I definitely made early on, and perhaps a lot of other players make early on, is they open the real book and they go, right, I'm gonna, it's like almost like a sight reading exercise. I'm gonna look at the chords. I'm gonna play with them. I'm gonna sight read the melody. And really, where possible, I think you should probably go and look for a version that is like a vocal version, because when you've got words hanging on the melody, it just sticks so much more, I think, anyway. Obviously there's some tunes that are instrumental and that perhaps don't necessarily might not have a vocal version, but being able to almost sing along the song when you're doing it, and I think it improves your phrasing as well, because you're thinking of it as if you're a vocalist. You're not just going, oh, it goes B, C, whatever. But I think
I totally agree. I totally agree. And of course, Lester Young, I mean, is famous. I don't know. There's like, it might be jazz mythology, but like supposedly he was playing a song once and he stopped in the middle and they asked him why he stopped. And he says, "I forgot the words." But I think it's kind of jazz mythology. I don't really believe it so much. But anyways, but I totally agree, but then again, so many of the songs have been turned into something completely different. Like if you listen to Miles Davis' "All of You," which is one of my North Stars for playing on My Funny Valentine record. I think it's on that record. And they're playing it so dark and angry because it's got that, this big chord, sound in there. And they're like playing the shit out of it. Then I heard the original version with, Fred Astaire in a movie. And it's a joke song. I mean, and you listen to the words, and it's like this tongue-in-cheek love, like a flirtatious thing, a comedy flirt song. I mean, some of the words like the east, west, north, and south of you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's like, and like, yeah, that didn't detract from me for how great Miles' version was, But I did realize, wow, this song was not conceived that way. And the more information you have, the more you think about stuff and you make your decisions what's important and what's not. That's exactly the kind of guy I want to play with.
Yeah,
Who's
yeah,
like,
yeah.
got a lot of information and now we're in the moment and that we're making decisions based on our imagination and living in the moment.
Yeah, yeah. So you mentioned
Back to the
about
melody, the melody. I think that so many people, they play and they think jazz is playing over the changes. That's it. And I mean, in my teaching, especially if any of my students are watching, they can chime in, know that I don't teach that way. And I don't believe that way. I think there are a lot of elements to use in your solo. And playing the changes is just one of them. And so, and then playing off the melody, I mean, that's where jazz started. If you listen to Louis Armstrong, basically his solos were embellishments of the melody.
yeah,
That's where jazz started. So if that's not in your toolbox, it's a really great one to have. It's really easy to do. And probably elements of your personal style are going to emerge, like no matter how beginning you may feel you are, when you start to hear yourself embellish the melody and play it your way, you're going to hear things that are going to be there in your playing when you become a master. It's just your personal style emerges because you have really great information that sounds good and you're just making it better.
yeah, yeah, yeah. One of the things that I think people might see him as a bit, maybe a bit of a barrier with the with trying to learn jazz is it seems like there's quite a lot of stuff that could be seen as a bit sort of, if you have to ask, you'll never know kind of thing, or it's a bit sort of more esoteric.
Yeah.
How do you balance? Because you mentioned about sort of playing the melody and using your ear and stuff. If that kind of stuff doesn't necessarily come natural to people, how do you balance the stuff that is perhaps a bit more less tangible with the kind of academic study? Like how do you marry those two
I don't
things?
know. I find it hard to believe that if you just didn't keep playing the melody, you know what I mean? At first, you're trying to play it right. I don't care how you remember it. Some people remember it from finger patterns. Some people remember it from like knowing the names of the intervals. Some people remember it from maybe a photographic memory. They can see them sheet music even though they're not looking at it.
Mm.
I don't care. I mean, any of those ways is great. Play it enough, eventually that stuff goes away and you just hear it. And then play it a little bit more, and you're going to get bored with the way you're playing it, and you're going to make shit out of it. I would suggest you just haven't spent enough time.
Mm.
That's why that's happening. I just refuse to believe that somebody wouldn't, after really kind of getting it down and knowing it, wouldn't hear cool things that they could do with it. It just, I mean, and if you're really the person that can't do that, I don't know where you're going to go with music. You know what I mean? but I refuse to believe that there's even a human being on Earth that is like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I might have sort of taught a few of them in the past, like some kids that just seem
And
to.
here's the drag of the equation. You want to know the real sad thing? Like I know thousands of tunes, right?
Yeah.
Somebody else knows one or none. Well, for them to learn one tune is really hard. You know, I mean, really hard. And for me to learn another 20 tunes is easy. But that's not fair. I mean, I already have a lot of tunes in here. You figure the guy who doesn't know any tunes has a lot more room. They should be learning faster than me. But it's just kind of obviously not the case. So be gracious with yourself. It's going to take a long time. The first 10 tunes are going to be the longest, but they're going to be the most valuable because you're really creating a framework for learning everything else. And might I suggest, we mentioned Guitar Wank podcast, that there's hundreds of episodes on guitarwank.com. There is one in particular. It's episode number 99V, as in Victor, the letter V. And it's called The Mother Tunes. Now, Scott wasn't there that day, so Troy and I just did one. And I had a guitar in my hands, and I talked about 10 tunes that I think should be the first tunes that everybody should learn and why, and how the melody teaches you how to hear harmony and how they interact with each other. And I'm playing the guitar while I'm doing it, and I'm saying, I picked this song because it has this sound in it, and this, can't you hear that? kind of thing. And so episode 99V, the letter V as in Victor, on guitarwank.com. I suggest everybody go check it out. Anybody who's been playing a lot, you probably know all these tunes, but you may not know them in a way that I'm explaining how we need to think about them. Because if you know those tunes, I suggest the next 20 tunes are going to be easy as shit. And the next 100 after that are going to be really easy, because you're starting to train yourself to identify harmonic sounds from melody. You're doing it the right way.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I just want to offer that up. It's free. Everybody can go check it out. And some of the tunes that are in the new book are mother tunes, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, there's a couple in there. I re-listened to that episode last night, actually. It was quite a. I remember the time it came out. It was quite like a. It's almost like a gift. It's quite a nice, because it's very well organized, and you explain it very well. Of like, this tune has this in it, and like 400 other tunes have that in it, but this is perhaps
Right.
the most explicit example of that thing.
Right. That melody just makes you hear that change. Now you hear the chord. Now when you hear it in another song, you're going to recognize it, just like the color red or the color blue. And boom, now you've just pushed yourself up to another level of playing and hearing that's going to make your music that much better. And that's the whole point of all this stuff, right? I mean, that's why we're doing the book, to give, not everybody can take a lesson from me. And even when they do, I'm sure when they hear me play, there's lots of stuff they want to ask about. Well, now the book is just basically, well, this is what it is. And obviously in the comments, I'm probably discussing it, but even if I'm not, you can just you can get it and play it, and you know what chord it goes over, and you know what situation I used it in. And I really expect that this is going to make my personal private teaching a lot more effective, having this book as a teaching aid.
Hmm.
I really do. I'm really excited about that part of it.
The comments are really helpful, because obviously when you put these videos out, it is like an improvised thing. You're just sitting down and doing it, and then there's an element of, what was I thinking? You know what I mean? And after the fact, where you're kind of like, oh yeah, you're almost transcribing yourself by looking back and going, oh yeah, that's that thing
not
I do.
Almost. I am. And I have one rule in my private lessons. Any of the guys who are watching, I'm sure some of my private students are, past private students. The one rule I have is, if I play something that you want to know, stop me right then. Don't wait till the end of a course. This isn't a gig. We don't have to worry about the audience. Stop me right then. Not because so much I can show you what I did. It's more importantly, I can tell you why I played it. Because I think that information, again, we mentioned this earlier today. It's like, as much as I could transcribe my favorite players off records or whatever, or steal their stuff, I couldn't ask them why they did it. And I think that's information that's really illuminating.
It's a really interesting point, that, actually, because it's not, if someone says, what were you doing there? That's a very different question to why were you doing that? And it might be, oh, because the bass player did this, or I heard this little drum fill, or
I just
I made a mistake and fell into that. It could even be the answer.
That's often the answer. Jazz, there's a lot of salvage going on in jazz music, actually in all music when you listen to it. You listen to a great symphony orchestra play, there's a mistake every second somewhere. And the reason why those guys are the top-notch players and playing in the top-notch orchestras is because they can adjust to it, and they can make it work. You know what I mean? They can feel it coming. They can get out. You know what I mean? It's like they can adjust to somebody else's mistake. That is what is valued as professional musicianship, as much as anything.
Yeah. I think we're nearing the Q&A section, if you like.
Oh, cool. I thought that's
can
where
I ask
we were
one?
already.
Well, there's a few coming in, but one personally from me, just for the the kind of keeping it on the solo jazz guitar thing, is taking an intro. I've seen Joe Pass talk about this, but setting up a tune, which is also relevant if you're in a band scenario. Someone might look at you and go start us off kind of thing. How would you sort of go about that, depending on the tune and things like that?
Well, you just hit on a big thing about Bruce Forman. I'm often referred to as an intro Nazi. Intros are very important to me, and in all my playing, I think it's one of the reasons I get so many gigs is because, you can look at me and go, you can be doing this, and from that, and you're telling me a tune and a key, I can give you a great introduction. And just keep making them. You know what I mean? And the reason is because and even in the first courses of the day, even though there's not a lot of intros there, you can hear how I start. There's a specific.
There's a setup.
I conceive of music and I hear music beginning, music and end. Now that could be a whole song, that could be a chorus, that could be a phrase. I am very much a completion Nazi, whatever. And so yeah, like for instance, if you were to play a bunch of stuff, pretty shit, that's not an intro. That's just stuff before the song in my mind.
Okay.
The intro is like. Now you knew to come in then, right?
Yeah. If I was a singer, if I was a band, yeah.
And it's got to be dinner is served. So it's like what I think where people get in trouble with intros is, of course, you're exposed. The band's about to play, the singer's about to sing, and you've got to play 8 bars all by yourself. And you're freaking out probably if you're a young or an inexperienced player. But you're also putting all the stress on yourself like, I've got to be brilliant.
Mm.
No. We don't want you to be brilliant. We only want 2 things from the intro. We want how are we going to play the song and when do we come in? That's all anybody wants. The audience, the band, that's all anybody wants. They don't want you to be brilliant. And in many cases, they don't even want you to let the world know what song it is because they want to be, when they play the melody, they want to let the world know what the song is. Now, you, of course, have to know. Sometimes you're playing with a singer who's not strong, won't be able to find their note unless you quote the melody a little bit. You need to know just by being aware of what your situation is, how much of what you want to do. But what's your, the intro is going to be a turnaround, the harmony from the first 8 bars or the last 8 bars, And then with the turnaround, there's a lot of options. You can play chordally, you can play linearly, you can play bass notes with it or bass notes without it. You can use chord substitutions. But the one thing I think you always need is a good melody. What made that work? That's that melody. Da, do do do. You were. I mean, I watched your head. Your head was like going, "Yeah, I got it."
Oh, I was in.
Like you knew when to come in and you knew how to come in because that melody wasn't the harmony; it was the melody that gave you that. So, and you guitar players out there, if you want to work, like I say, comping is the gateway. I said that earlier. Well, intros is going to be one of your main gigs because chances are you're being called to play the piano part in jazz, the harmony part. So you're going to have to play intros. And if you've got if you're comfortable with intros, then you're going to get a lot of gigs. And if you get a lot of gigs, you're going to get a lot better. And you're going to play with better players. And you're going to get a chance to learn more tunes. And then when you play the tunes, you're going to learn to experience and find new substitutions because you're going to be playing those changes over and over again. And at some point, you're just going to try shit and you're going to figure out really cool things because you've been listening to music. It's all there in your head. It's just waiting to come out.
Yeah.
And so that to me, and endings is another thing, just like intros. I'm a real ending Nazi too. And again, why did I do first chorus of the day? Because I heard people wanking on the internet. And I'm thinking to myself, who other than a fellow musician is going to like that? I mean, do we want people to hate jazz music? That's a good way to make them do it. Play a bunch of isolated riffs that are like impressive to other musicians. That's a great way to make people hate music, in my opinion. So I'm a real completion freak. So when I did first chorus of the day, that's what you hear. You hear kind of, it may not hear an intro, but you'll hear the beginning of the song stated in such a way that it is an intro to my improvisation that's in the middle. And you'll hear me wrap it up at the end.
Yeah.
And even if you dig deeper into it, you'll hear every phrase kind of has that quality to it because it's just it's really a way of thinking. It's not, you know what I mean? It's not it's not something that's conceived and I'm putting on myself. It's just a way I'm thinking because of the music I've listened to, and of course because of the mentors I've had who demanded it of me, or I wasn't going to keep the gig.
Mm. It's an interesting point. We've got quite a few questions, so I'll have to get some of these.
I talk a lot.
No, it's absolutely fine. I could do this for ages. One very small, it's a very small thing on that is you talk quite a lot about with like an audience in mind, which is quite a nice thing, because a lot, when people talk about jazz a lot of the time or learning jazz,
Right.
it's all very academic. But you're talking about, you mention the gig or the audience or the melody and things being listenable. It's not just about the intense kind of nuts and bolts of it all, which is quite nice. But on to the actual, the questions from the audience. So, hey Bruce, could you give us some tips on how you hold your pick and adjust your angle of picking?
Wow.
Very specific technique
Yeah,
question.
I mean, I hold it. I hope everybody can see it. It's just kind of like it sits on my thumb and this first knuckle, and then it protrudes out sort of straight, And I try to keep it generally as flat as possible, perpendicular, I guess that is, to the string, or no, parallel. I don't know,
Parallel.
whatever, flat, because like that way I have the ability to change my tone by pivoting. You know what I mean? Like
Okay.
a little more bite while I'm playing the blues, or have a note really kind of rake a little bit. I can turn to the side and get it. But I do find that the most sound and the cleanest, purest, best sound is straight on flat to the string. Okay. And then I do use my fingers whenever I feel like it. I mean, I love playing finger style, of course with Joe, he made me do it a lot. But I just like the clarity of the bass notes with the pick. So I just started realizing I like doing also hybrid.
Yeah.
Because jazz guitars can be a little boomy down low or indistinct sometimes. So to play with your pick, it's like having a good fingernail, like a classical player. So I'll do that a lot. I mean, I still will play fingerstyle some, but I have no compunction. Just like if I was going to play this arpeggio, that was hybrid, that was picked. So I have two different ways to do it. Obviously, I want to be able to do it either way, and because I'm just singing the notes. So if I hear my finger, I'll play my finger. If I'm hearing my pick, I'll play the pick. So, and the type of pick I like to use is, this is basically looks like a Fender Heavy, right? And it is the same shape, except for it's Dunlop it's called a prime tone. And the reason I like it better, it's the same basic composition as the Fender, plastic-wise, but it's got really good tapered edges. Because if I was buying Fender picks, I had to pull out an emery cloth and basically clean off the edges of almost every one. They were kind of rough. So these are really beautifully tapered, really playable right from the beginning. I like the 1.0 because that's about the equivalent to a Fender Heavy. And for playing solo, I might like to go a little thicker, but what I find is the thick picks, they sound great when you're practicing, but then when you play with people, there's not a lot of projection. Like the notes have a tendency to be thicker and darker and less pointed. So if you've got a drummer or a bass player around you, you get kind of buried. I like having, I like having as much brightness as I can tolerate in my sound. Obviously jazz is known for being very turn the tone out to zero and put flat wounds on, and you can't, well, that's cool. You won't even be able to hear the notes I'm playing, you know what I mean? So how can you be a wrong note? But, we want the balls of a tenor player, but, I like clarity. And one of the reasons I love this guitar, single coil pickup, this is a Charlie Christian pickup from 1939. And I always loved flat wound strings, but with humbuckers, I found that it just started to sound like an electric bass to me. But with this pickup, and I kept this guitar the way Barney had it, at the beginning, and I still do now, but I realized that, wow, having a pickup like this, flat wound strings are really clear sounding now. So, a lot of times it's just, I mean, I went from the pick question to something else, but yeah, deluxe. I like Dunlop prime tone picks. I know people buy the blue chips, that cost $50 a piece, and I just don't trust myself not to lose them. So they
Yeah,
sound fine
yeah.
to me, but I actually kind of like these better. And actually playing Western swing, you know, things like that. You can hear how just, you know what I mean. It's just easier to strum with a bigger pick,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
and have a little brightness in it. I mean, it just feels like it's a natural transition from a line to a chord to a harmonized line. That's what I was going for. So that's kind of the whole idea of picking. I
Yeah, yeah,
hope I
yeah.
answered the question. I probably answered 5 other questions
No,
too.
it's good. I will cherry pick out some of these. How do you develop harmonic movement for a tune and reharmonization options?
Ah,
It's a hell of a
well,
big question, I'll admit.
that's a big question, and I mean, of course, I suggest you get the book because you will get to observe those firsthand, and of course, listen to many other first courses of the day or my records, because also you'll not only hear me do it in my improvisation, but you'll also hear me arranging the tunes. So you'll get an insight into how because that's a different kind of reharmonizing, right? You have a lot of time on your hands to really decide what you're doing, whereas in improvisation, you're just kind of taking what comes up
Mm.
and what you can do. But a couple of ideas for reharmonization is contrary motion, like take a melody and maybe use descending bass against it. Things like that. Maybe ascending bass. Which was when the melody goes up, it's not as good. You know, but it's still okay. Now, what do I have? I have a bass note and I have a melody note, and I have to come up with a chord sound that supports all that, right? Well, you want to learn chords? This is a great way to do it, right? I've got this first chord. Okay, that's a good major chord. Now that's got to be a dominant 7. Yeah, I don't want it. I want a dominant 7 with some bite in there. Well, that's got to be a flat 9. And it's a plus 11 chord, obviously. Sus chord with a 9, with a 13. Well, that's going to sound like a minor 7 flat 5 chord. Well, there's you got a major plus 11. You know what I mean? Just by demanding, I got to color this thing. What color? What do I want? Well, you play a few chords. It's got to, from the top note, what it's got to have, and you put a third in it. Oh wow, I hear that. Wow, man. 2 minutes later, you know what these chords sound like, and when you want to use them, you grab them that quickly. So that's another thing I like to do.
Just to join two things together there. So the level of kind of experimentation and exploration you're talking about,
Yeah,
kind of relies on some of the guys maybe already having a certain amount of knowledge, and I think
yeah.
again it's that thing of the sort of academic study versus the slightly freer thing. But how, if somebody's trying to sort of start out in jazz, what would the weighting be of those things? Because I
Learning the
agree with what
song.
you're saying, but
Learning
yeah.
the song. I think that's all predicated on that basic thing, learning the song. I think people try to reharmonize things before they know it. And so then all the information they're gleaning it may sound good and it becomes an arrangement they use. But in terms of it being useful information in their life as a musician, it's kind of sequester. Oh, yeah, that's what I play for that one chorus of that one tune, instead of it informing the entire performance or of your life.
Mm.
So I think not knowing the tune, like I have a lot of guys that can play great chord melodies, and you probably know them too. But if you ask them just to play the melody without the chords in it, they couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Just have a memorized arrangement. Well, that's going to mean that everything you memorize in that arrangement is unusable in all the other songs that have similar harmonic progressions, because it's attached. It's just you're just a trained monkey in a circus at this point. You're not I mean, the difference between in my opinion, and classical musicians and jazz musicians. Classical musicians generally play better than we do. Jazz musicians know more about what they're doing.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Okay, and so, hey, you've got this great arranger. I'm not saying don't learn Johnny Smith's "I'm Old Fashioned" or Martin Taylor, I mean, or Lenny Breau or Ted Green or even me, learning that. But if you don't know the melody, and if you don't know the basic chords, all this information I'm giving you is only going to be useful in this one situation. Whereas if you know the chords and the melody, this information is like, wow, I can use it on this tune. I can use it on this tune, and I can use it this way instead of that way. It just becomes, you know what I mean? It becomes a piece of your information instead of something you memorized.
Yeah, I got you. We've got one about thoughts around players having problems with rhythm or time aspects of their playing. And if you've dealt with any students in the past, how do you go about improving those aspects?
Well, I'm one of those guys too. We're all that guy. I've never met anybody that says they swing as hard as they want to or they flow as well as they want to. I mean, it's a work in progress, and a lot of it is learned on the bandstand playing with people that got that thing, that you just feel it and you got it. I would suggest though, and I've had numerous students and they come to me and because I ask them all, it's kind of like a doctor's appointment, the first lesson. Like, what do you perceive your strength and your weaknesses? What do you like about your playing? What don't you like about it? What do you want to achieve? That kind of stuff. Numerous people say, I want to work on my time. They don't feel their time. And of course, everybody's right. Nobody's time is good enough. But I'm a believer in that working on your time is not possible. I believe you have to believe that you've got good time. And you have to be a hero. You have to be the one that when you go to play something, it's going to be the right thing to play. And it's often not, but you deal with it then. But just the commitment of playing and the lack of tentativeness gives it a chance at sounding good. So I suggest, hey, your time's great. You just want it to get better. How are you going to get better? Well, of course, you're going to play with good players. That's one way. You're going to play more. That's another way. You're going to play with a metronome, but this is not a medieval torture tool. This is actually a good friend. Now you've got the best drummer in the world snapping their fingers for you. So, can you hear that kind of?
Yeah, really clear.
I'll slow it down a little. Can you hear it?
Yeah.
No, I like to hear that on 2 and 4, but more importantly, when I snap my fingers, I kind of snap behind 2 and 4 a little bit. So I'm hearing it in this weird space. You're hearing it with your parent, but the one thing, we got a consistent beat here. 1, 2, 1, 2. And I mean, I guess you could say I'm working on my time, but I'm just playing. And this guy here is making sure that I'm like kind of keeping it steady. But half the people I play with rush or drag. Why would I want to be steady when they're rushing and dragging? I want to be there to kind of hold them back from rushing too much or for dragging too much. But I'm not definitely there to play the right time while they're going somewhere else. The idea is to play music together. And chances are when we get intense, we will speed up a little bit. And when we kind of relax, we will kind of shade down. I mean, that can happen. And it feels good. The whole idea is make it feel good. Don't worry about your time. Be thinking about making it feel good instead of worrying if my time is any good. Because worrying about your time creates this neurosis and anxiety and tentativeness, all the things that we don't need on the bandstand. So be a hero. That's my suggestion to everybody.
I like it. Be a hero.
Yeah.
Right, let's have a look here. I'd like to know a little bit about what it's like to teach and play the blues with Josh Smith.
To teach and play, well, Josh is amazing. You know, I mean, wow. I love him. You know, he's such a serious musician. He's such a gifted musician. He's such a, yeah, he's just a badass, total badass. And he's also a really cool human being. You know what I mean? And you know, I didn't teach. One day we kind of hung out and we played, and you know, I played my way and he played his, and it was a great time. And I just pointed out some things. So I guess, and he kind of claims that it changed his life. You know, just some things I suggested to him, which I'm sure, which I know he teaches in his stuff because I've heard him use the words. You know, and it was just simple. It's like, you know, I heard him playing. You know. I heard him playing and he played a certain way, but then when he comped for me, I heard him always going, you know, like, you know, typical blues comping like that. And all I said to him was like, you know, I noticed you do that. And I played it back for him. He said, yeah. And I said, how come you never use any of those sounds in your solo? And that, like a light bulb went off in his head. And really, you know, changed he claims, not my words, he claims changed the way he thought about his playing, you know, and it's a very jazz oriented concept, right? You know, and all I did was kind of play that F sharp before the F before I went to the B flat, right? I just went with my line instead of my chord.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of just something I pointed out to him as a friend, you know, and he ran with it, and he's done so many things with it that you know that I need to take a lesson from him about now, you know.
It's back to that thing as playing as like a social activity as well, of not
Yeah,
always being in isolation. You know, not trying to learn
right.
everything in isolation.
You know, and I'm an older guy, so I get away with saying shit, you know, now that I probably couldn't have said when I was younger. You know, I've noticed that, and I like to make jokes and I like to tell the truth. So, you know, I have
Yeah.
been known to. A lot of people take it the wrong way. I mean, I always mean it and wanting them to get better, you know, but sometimes it sounds a little critical, but it's not. It's not meant that way, you know.
Yeah.
Uh,
We've got another one here about the accommodations you make for a singer. You won't play the melody, so what choices do you make? So I guess
well,
if
you
you're
know,
backing a
yeah.
singer.
I mean, okay, back to young Bruce story number. This is like everybody. I'm sure the people that know me real well are rolling their eyes. I got to listen to this one now.
The archives.
So I was playing when I was about 16 or 17. I got called to play with this organ trio down in San Francisco. I guess we called it the Tenderloin or the Fillmore then. It was kind of right where they meet. It was a rough end of town. Well, white people were afraid to go there, but it wasn't really rough. And it was an organ trio. And I'm playing there, and I'm carrying. Back in the day, I don't know how I did this. I carried a twin reverb with JBLs around.
Right.
You know how heavy. You know how heavy that is, right?
I used to have a twin in a flight case, and it was
Okay,
just
that is like insane. I can't believe that I did that. You know. Anyways, so I got my amp in there, and I'm on the stage, and it's all well lit, and all of a sudden I'm in the dark, and I look around, and there's this woman who's like, I'm a big guy, I'm like 6'3", and she was easily 6'5", 250. I mean, huge, big black woman with a white afro wig, and she was wearing like a gown that was all sequined like mirrors, kind of just, you know, so it made it look even bigger. You know, she looked like the defensive line of a football team, basically. And she said to me, she said, "You the new guitar player?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "Let me tell you the 3 don'ts of accompaniment." And I went, "Okay." And she said, "Don't play too loud, don't play too much, and don't play the fucking melody." And I have, to this day, never heard a better description of comping for a vocalist.
yeah, it's fair. It's fair.
You know what I mean? Right there. You know, of course, duo's different than in a trio behind us or with a duo with a bass. You know, I mean, obviously, if it's just duo, I mean, I want to provide a little more bass than I normally would, and you know, because there's no bass player. Um, if there's a bass player, I'm probably not going to play hardly any bass, you know, and lean more towards melodic voice leading and just laying carpet, except for when the phrases open up, just like Nat Cole, you know, wait for the phrase to open up, then play a little thing that connects and says, like, dinner is served, please sing the next phrase, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
but not too much. Definitely be super conscious of volume. And that's like a thing you can do in your solo playing too. Because, like, for instance, let's say that there are three things here. There's me blowing, there's chord melody, and there's comping. Okay. Now I'm going to tell you that you can hear the difference, right? So it's like, okay. So that was comping. How could you tell? Because it was just set in the groove. And it was softer than the soloist. More comping. Now some chord melody. Back to comping. I mean, you can actually hear the difference, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's got so much life in it as well.
Why could you hear the difference? Comping really wasn't different than chord melody. I'm playing chords. They were melodic. The difference was the attitude, the dynamic, and the way I used it. You were totally like making advanced musical calculations as a listener because I was presenting it to you in a clear way.
Hmm.
I was hearing the comping as comping. So I played more in the pocket, a little less aggressive, softer than the soloist, right? As soon as I wanted you to hear chord melody, I jumped up not louder than the line because I want to be able to go back to lines whenever I want, but as loud as lines. And there was a lot more of a aggressiveness to it. You dig what I'm saying? So that immediately you just took it in as chord melody because that's what it was. But we as musicians have to know what we're doing or we're not clear. And people get confused
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what we're doing. And that makes our playing less effective.
Yeah, there's so much kind of non-verbal communication that goes on that could
Right.
perhaps get
And,
missed, you
but
know.
we have to be aware of that as players. And that's the, like I said, what did I say? Listen, play, and learn tunes. That's the listen thing. That's hearing the difference between, like, you listen to Wynton Kelly, you know, that's like right hand, left hand comping,
Mm.
that's so much. But, that's more big band style, but bebop would, I mean, thing like that. You know what I mean? It's like, why do I know this? Because I've listened to music and I can hear it. And I have a clear idea of what I'm trying to achieve through these textures. And then in my practice, I work on them. Work on lines. Work on comping. Work on chord melody. Big band. Line with kind of chords. You know what I mean? Each thing has like a specific thing that I want to do, and so I work on it.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
And then I bring it back into the machine to make it work with everything else.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Got you. Right, so I've got one kind of last question that is
Right.
from
Okay.
me. Sorry, chat. But I think it will kind of wrap this thing up. So imagine you're young Bruce back in the day and you receive your book, well, this book, but it's perhaps from one of your heroes. How would
Yeah.
you go about using this tome of knowledge?
Well, I would kind of listen to it. I would get it, read the comments probably. Then I would listen to the video, and then I would just start stealing shit that I liked. And
Yeah.
then, like for instance, if it's a 2/5, I'd take that. I'd find a tune that has lots of 2/5s, like "How High the Moon" or "Tune Up" or "Star Eyes." That modulates and has a lot of 2/5s. And I would kind of try to use that idea at every 2/5 that came up. Force myself to play it all around the neck. And of course, you realize the first 20 times you try to play it, you're going to create variations because you're going to screw it up.
Mm.
But that doesn't mean you played something bad. It just means you didn't play what you intended to play. So you need to listen to that. Then I know I'm going to get good at it and I'll be able to do it. And then I'll be tired of it and I'll start making things out of it. And then I'll move on to the next thing. You know, that would be how I would suggest most people work it. If there's something in there that they really think would be a great piece just to learn all the way through, I would say, yeah, go ahead. But I think more importantly, it could be serve as a great reference book. Like, there's 16 endings there that you need to know.
Yeah,
Granted,
I had a brief look.
Granted, I didn't play a lot of intros on this. You know what I mean? I probably did on some of them. I can't remember now, but there are endings. And I mean, let's face it, we're coming around to the end of the tune. What's happening? We're going to play the end of the tune. Chances are, if we're playing, there's no piano player. We're in there. What do we know? It's going to come to a tag or it's not, right? Now, let's say it tags, so we got the tag. Now we're still waiting for the ending because what I call the ending is after that. Okay, boom, that last note. Now, am I responsible for playing the little thing?
The little
or
thing.
or is the singer or the horn player going to do it? And I hate when they do this. This is again being an ending Nazi. I like proper distribution of labor. Like if you Blackbird bye bye, I can't play the word bye on my guitar. I've tried.
Yeah.
It just doesn't happen. Okay, so if the singer goes Blackbird bye dibba 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 or something like that, it's like I have to just wait till they're done. And meanwhile, the world didn't hear the last word. Or even when the horn player does it, you didn't hear the last note of the melody because they're so busy playing their cool shit. And I really hate when they do that, but of course it's their gigs. So if they want to do it, I got to leave. But chances are they're going to do the right thing, which is play that note. Now I have to play the thing at the end. And of course, well, there's the Duke Ellington, right? That's a famous one. There's the Count Basie. You could play a blues lick. You know, you could play what Louis Armstrong always played, right? Or Dexter Gordon always liked. Red Garland liked this. So like I've got 5 basic ones just to pull out of my ass anytime I need them. I think about it before that moment. I kind of make a decision. Well, I'm going to play that or a variation of that, hoping that I'll think of something better when the moment comes. But if I don't, I've got this one ready. It's cocked and loaded and aimed and ready to go.
Yeah.
And we're going to have where we gave all this blood for 5 minutes on this tune, and we're not going to spill it on the floor on the end. So again, you're getting an insight into how I think, and probably it's helping people who do get the book use my material because they know that was the whole point of First Chorus of the Day, was play music, don't play the guitar.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think we're about at time. I don't know if Luke wants to come in and tell the people all the specifics.
Man, I might outsource more of these because this was so much fun to just be able to sit back and take it in. Normally, I'm the guy. I'm normally there like I've got to think of a question. I've got to think of a question and panicking, not able to enjoy it. That was magic, man. So thank you, Dan, for taking my job so I could really enjoy you, Bruce. Cheers for that.
Welcome.
Guys in the chat, we've had some cool questions about the book and stuff. Firstly, thank you, Bruce, for giving up the time today. Thank you for the book project. It's been awesome working on that. And I know that from people's reaction in the comments, I know this is exactly what they're looking for. From the questions they've asked, what they've asked me about the book and stuff like that, I know it's going to go down a treat. So I'm really happy that we're able to do this together. Guys on YouTube, if you have appreciated Dan tonight, feel free to hit sub to his channel. What kind of stuff do you post, Dan?
Um, Bits of all sorts, really. Little kind of educational things. I am kind of similar to Bruce in one sense, is that I'll go, oh, I'm going to do a video about this, and then I find myself talking for about 40 minutes, and it's like, well, does the internet really need 40 minutes talking about one thing when they want these little, tiny bite-sized things? But mainly educational stuff, not really any reviews or anything like that. So you want to get better at playing, there might be something on there that you like.
Awesome. You guys will be able to rewatch this video on his channel for the next 7 days. Then this becomes bonus content from the book, so you'll only be able to see it if you get the book. Some fine details on the book before. I know Ruby's there, and you guys are gonna have to wait to see her. This is how I've got you hooked. You can't close now. Ruby's coming up. If you guys grab, if you
Go
grab
ahead.
the PDF of the book, when the paperback comes out on Friday, if you decide you want to grab the paperback too, just send me proof of purchase of the paperback, and you'll get $5 back on the PDF. So you can get a little bundle deal for both of them. And I'll quickly read you through these the list of tunes because it's pretty awesome. So we've got. Let's see if I can do this in one breath. No, I can't. Stella by Starlight, Confirmation, Someday My Prince Will Come, Softly as in the Morning Sunrise, Body and Soul, I Hear a Rhapsody, Bill Pleased, All the Things You Are, Tea for Two, You in the Night and the Music, Polka Dots and Moonbeams, 12 O'Clock Blues, Chitlins Con Carne, Blues for Wes, Ain't Misbehaving, and I'm Getting Sentimental Over You. And these are all. Wow, okay, so first of all, I can't think of another jazz etudes book that has that many. And they're all done in Bruce's incredible, joyous style, steeped in tradition and like language. So yeah, there's so much in there. Bruce, I'll just hand it back over to you. So thank you again, and I think if you can show everyone Ruby, then they can tick that off their list of why they came.
She's used to doing this at the beginning. Let's see if how good she is. Okay, so I'm just gonna play. No, she's not gonna do it. Come here, Ruby. Come on. Come on. Come on. Okay. I had to call prompt her. Usually it's the first course of the day, she's fresh.
That's all right. Well, does she normally sing? Like singers never know when to come in, so we'll let her off.
It's usually my bass. I think she's in pain because it's my singing so bad. But and for those of you who want to hear some others, they're still up on my Instagram page, and you'll find Ruby singing. And there's my Facebook. People can follow me there, and there's a lot on YouTube too. So.
And you've got stuff on Spotify as well, right, Bruce?
I got stuff everywhere, man. I'm splattered all over the place.
Yeah, one other thing people have mentioned in the comments is your My Music Masterclass courses,
Yes.
which is actually how I found out about you.
Oh, really? That's and again, it's kind of, if you like my style of teaching, you'll love those. I mean, I pick a subject, and it's like, except for the jazz guitar one, which I suggest everybody get. After that, which is a general masterclass in jazz guitar. Then after that, everything has like either it's chord melody or intros and endings, or it's like playing, like learning tunes. I've got, like I really focus on one aspect of the music, and I'm real proud of those. So people who want to check that out, it would be a good augmentation to the book. I think the book is far more nuts and bolts of what's happening. Of course, by having the video and having tablature, it's going to really make it easier. I don't do a lot of that with the My Music Masterclass. I kind of explain the concepts, and you can maybe stop my hands every now and then and figure out what I'm doing, but it's not like the book. But it would be a great counterbalance to the book, more conceptual.
Fantastic. So, Bruce, thank you so much. Dan,
Hey, this is
thank
great.
you.
Let's do it again sometime. I really had a ball.
Oh, wonderful. Well, Well, everyone's asking for another book already, so so maybe.
Okay.
And everyone on YouTube who's tuned in, thank you all so much. I think we averaged about 100 people at all times, so that's pretty cool. Guys,
Yeah.
we'll catch you next time then. See ya.
Okay. All right, everybody. Thank you.